Live from London, this is BBC News. Breaking news from Gaza. Israeli forces recover the bodies of 6 people taken hostage by Hamas in a tunnel under the city of Rafah. The White House confirms one of them is American. The front line of Gaza's health crisis, fighting pauses so children can start receiving polio vaccinations in a mass immunization campaign by humanitarian agencies. Airports across 30 European countries go back to their old rulebook, reintroducing carry-on liquid restrictions. A political stunt. US Vice President Kamala Harris accuses former President Donald Trump of taking his election campaign to Arlington Cemetery, a sacred military burial site. And rap music stars lead tributes for Fat Man Scoop, who has died after collapsing on stage. Hello, I'm Catherine Byaruhanga. We start with breaking news from Gaza. The Israeli military says it has discovered a number of bodies in Gaza and is working to determine their identities. In the past few minutes, the White House released the following statement. Earlier today, in a tunnel under the city of Rafah, Israeli forces recovered 6 bodies of hostages held by Hamas. We have now confirmed that one of the hostages killed by these vicious Hamas terrorists was an American citizen, Hersh Goldberg, Poland. Well, let's look at the wider situation. To look at the wider situation with me is Mohamed Taha from BBC Arabic. Mohamed, thank you for joining us on the program. So this breaking news in the past few minutes, we knew that the Israeli forces had discovered some bodies under Rafah. Now we know that one of them is an American citizen. What more do we know about what's happening there at the moment?
So we knew about recovering the bodies of the hostages a few hours ago, and the announcement from the White House came just a few minutes ago that one of these bodies is American. The American citizen is Hersh Goldberg, Poland, and his parents were really vocal about him. They made interviews in the US and in Israel, and I guess you did an interview with one of his parents before, and it's really sad news for the hostages' families to see their loved ones dying, the despair amongst the families of the hostages, also the despair of the people of Gaza of having no deal for a ceasefire and exchange between the hostages and the prisoners.
Yes, there's been a statement from the family of Hersh Goldberg, Poland. They wrote on Facebook, "With broken hearts, the Goldberg Poland family is devastated to announce the death of their beloved son and brother Hersh. The family thanks you all for your love and support and asks for privacy at this time." You mentioned there the campaigns by Hersh's family, but also other families of hostages still held in Gaza. What impact do you think this news coming in from Rafah will have on people in Israel who are really desperate to get their loved ones back?
Yeah, people in Israel were demonstrating last night, as they used to do after their Sabbath, to ask Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, to strike a deal and to get the rest of the hostages back alive. We believe that there are more than 40 alive hostages still in Gaza, and you know the negotiations that recently happened in Qatar and Doha did not result any advancement. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is really keen to keep forces in Gaza, especially in the Philadelphia corridor, in the borders between Egypt and Gaza, and in Netzarim corridor that is separating the north and southern Gaza. And with this vision that Israeli forces would stay in Gaza with no permanent ceasefire, with with no perspective of returning the refugees to their homes, with no perspectives of rebuilding Gaza. So I think Hamas militants would say, that there is no point of having a deal with Israel, and Israel want to really go ahead with their strategic plans in Gaza, and the people who are paying the price amongst that are the families, hostages, and the civilians in Gaza.
And focus also at the moment on what's happening in the occupied West Bank. We've seen 4 days of a military operation by Israeli forces there. Intense battles focused on the city of Jenin and the refugee camp there.
Indeed, the fighting is really intensified in Jenin. We saw statements from Herzi Halevi, the Israeli the chief of staff. He visited Jenin. This is a clear sign that the fighting shifted a little bit from Gaza to the West Bank. Israel wants to protect the settlers who are living in the West Bank. Their numbers are more than 400,000 people living in the West Bank in different settlements, and there were clashes between Palestinians and these settlers all the time, and really Israel want to protect them. So we see the intensity of fighting in Gaza, the intensity of fighting in the West Bank, and the despair is really continued. We saw also that Israel announced the killing of one soldier and one officer in the operation in the West Bank, which is adding more pain to the both parties, the Israeli society, and we saw also the deaths of many Palestinians in the West Bank.
Mohamed, thank you. That's Mohamed Taha from BBC Arabic.
Thank you, Catherine.
And just to remind you of the breaking news in the past few minutes, which is that the White House is confirming that one of the 6 bodies found under the city of Rafah in a tunnel there is of an American citizen. So that's the statement there on your screens. It says, earlier today in a tunnel under the city of Rafah, Israeli forces recovered 6 bodies of hostages held by Hamas. We have now confirmed that one of the hostages killed by these vicious Hamas terrorists was an American citizen, Hersh Goldberg, Poland. And there's been a statement from the family thanking everyone for their love and support and asking for privacy at this time. Well, staying with the conflict between Israel and Hamas, UN officials and local health workers are preparing to roll out a mass vaccination program for polio in Gaza that will rely on a series of limited pauses in fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas fighters. The World Health Organization says it will need to vaccinate at least 90% of children under 10 for the campaign to succeed. Its campaign was organized after a 10-month-old baby was partly paralyzed by the first case of the virus in 2 decades. On Saturday, medics vaccinated children at one hospital in a symbolic move ahead of the official campaign. From Jerusalem, our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell reports.
Just 2 drops. As the UN begins vaccinating against polio in Gaza, a dose is easy to give. But carrying out a mass immunisation campaign in a combat zone is a huge challenge. Parents of the first vaccinated children are relieved.
I was worried and afraid because this is scary, the polio disease. This disease makes the children unable to move.
Baby Abdul Rahman was crawling early, but now his mum worries he'll never be able to walk. He was the first child found to have polio in Gaza in 25 years, and it paralysed his leg. Because of the war, he wasn't vaccinated, and now medical care is limited.
Aboud wants to live and be treated. He wants to live and walk like other children. I feel a lot of guilt that he didn't get the vaccination, but I couldn't give it to him because of our circumstances.
Displaced 5 times, the baby's family now lives in a crowded tent camp in Deir Balach in central Gaza. Raw sewage flows through streets nearby. Conditions are ideal for diseases to spread, especially polio, which is highly infectious. Since discovering the virus, UN agencies have been racing to set up an emergency mass vaccination programme. And with war raging, they've negotiated 3 localised 3-day pauses in fighting with Israel and Hamas. UN officials say the plan is not ideal, but it's workable.
What we are aiming at is to have 640,000 children below the age of 10 vaccinated in just a few days in the Gaza Strip. We need to reach at least 90%. Without that, there is a risk that the virus would mutate and that the transmission could continue.
Children make up nearly half the population of Gaza, and the past year has deprived many of their loved ones, their homes and health. With no end in sight to the war, the hope is that at least one new source of suffering can be eliminated. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, joining me from Nusrat in central Gaza is a UN spokesperson, Louise Wateridge. Thank you for joining us on the programme. So, a big day for families in Gaza, especially in the central part of the territory where you're joining us from. Just explain to us how this campaign is going to unfold over the next few hours and the next few days.
Yes, so I'm joining you from the middle area of the Gaza Strip, and that is where today we are going ahead. The United Nations is starting the vaccination campaign in this area. There are going to be 3 phases of the area of the vaccination campaign. The first is starting here where I am in the middle area. We've got 3 days aligned for this, and then an additional catch-up day, a 4th day, to make sure that we try and get all of the children in this area vaccinated, all the children who are under 10 years old. We estimate that's around 156,000 children just in the middle area. So 4 days we have to work to get these children the vaccines. After that, we will move to the southern area of the Gaza Strip. This is in Khan Yunis. Again, 3 days and a 4th day to catch up. Finally, the campaign will go to the north of the Gaza Strip and similar pattern there, where 3 days and the 4th to catch up. We are hopeful that these humanitarian pauses will hold while we're issuing this campaign. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of excitement. Already the teams are mobilizing this morning. They're going to the health centers, they're going to our mobile medical points, and they're ready. So we're very hopeful that we will see some positive news coming from this vaccination campaign in the coming days.
And we know that over the past few months that this conflict has been unfolding, that the healthcare system in Gaza has been devastated, decimated, hospitals, clinics. How are you going to manage to carry out this campaign? Do you have the resources? Do you have the staff to be able to implement it?
Yeah, as you say, I mean, I've been to so many health centers here that are completely destroyed, that are damaged. People are working under incredibly unbelievable conditions. You know, some of the hospitals you go to, they smell of blood. They haven't got cleaning products. They haven't got hygiene products. It's really been nothing short of a nightmare for the health staff. But in that same sentence, I can tell you they are the most dedicated people you could ever believe. Really, the healthcare workers who have been working the last 10 months in the Gaza Strip, they are so dedicated to the cause, and it's in them that I trust this campaign will have some success. The facilities, some we've lost, some we cannot access, but these teams are going to be going tent to tent. They're going to be going to mobile medical points. They're really going to do everything they can to make sure they are reaching these children and as many children as possible to get that 90% success rate.
Louise Wateridge, thank you for joining us on the programme. That's Louise Wateridge of the UN Refugee Agency there in Gaza. Well, just a reminder of the breaking news in the past few minutes, which is that the White House is confirming that one American citizen has been found dead in a tunnel under the city of Rafah. This is one of the 6 bodies that had been recovered by Israeli forces. Well, with me is Mohamed Taha from BBC Arabic. And Mohamed, that statement there, of course, from the White House, just explain to us what we've heard over the past few hours, which is that the Israeli forces had found more bodies under the city of Rafah.
Indeed, the Israeli forces found in a tunnel 6 bodies of the hostages in the last few hours, and in the last few minutes the United States announced that one of them is Mr. Hirsch, who was 23 years old. He was in the musical festival in Israel, in southern Israel, when Hamas launched their attack on Israel on the 7th of October. Now Hirsch is dead with amongst the other 5 people. This is not the first time that Israel would find bodies. They found bodies in the northern Gaza a few days ago. They found bodies across their campaign. Now, as Israel is controlling nearly the whole, every part of Gaza, they start to find bodies. They found a few days ago one alive hostage, and they did the operation in Nusayrat when they freed 3 hostages before. Now, the story of the hostages is unfolding in the coming days as Israel is controlling Gaza, and there is no deal of exchanges happening between them and Hamas. We see this news that is adding despair to the families of the hostages and also the civilians who are living in Gaza.
And just remind us that the Israeli government is under real pressure domestically to ensure that all hostages are returned from Gaza. And this really has also been the focus of those negotiations that we have seen continuing to try and reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza.
Indeed, we saw last night massive demonstrations in Tel Aviv asking the Israeli Prime Minister to strike this deal. We saw the last 2 weeks there were negotiations in Doha and in Cairo to reach a deal. Israel apparently is very keen to continue their strategic aims in Gaza, to keep the presence of their forces in Gaza, in Netzarim corridor that's separating the north from the south of Gaza, and in the borders between Israel and Egypt, or Gaza and Egypt. They have no intention of having full withdrawal from Gaza. They have no intention of having a full ceasefire. There is no perspective for the Palestinians to return back to their homes, and there is no perspective of rebuilding the Gaza. There is that despair in Gaza that is manifested in the Palestinian civilians and in the position of Hamas, also is reflected on the situation of the hostages. We see these deaths. We don't know what are the circumstances of these deaths. Have they died from Israeli shelling? Have they died on the hands of the Hamas militants? We don't know. But the whole situation of the standstill situation in the negotiations table is reflected on this suffering on both the families of the hostages and the civilians who are living in Gaza.
And today, Mohamed, we're seeing the beginning of these humanitarian pauses, not ceasefires in Gaza, but humanitarian pauses to allow for the vaccination of children against polio. Those should start any moment now in Gaza. Does that perhaps give us hope that there could be room for negotiation, room for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas?
Indeed, what's Gaza seeing in around 1 hour and a half, the pause in fighting, the Palestinians did not see any pause in fighting since November. So this is a big moment for the people in Gaza to see pause in fighting. And as Louise, your interview with Louise, she said it's not only 3 days. She said 3 days in the middle of Gaza, 3 days in the southern Gaza, and 3 days in northern Gaza. We are talking about more than 10 days with the extra days. This is, of course, giving hope to the people of Gaza, giving hope to the people of the families of the hostages, who requested also that the polio vaccination would be including the hostages as they are living in Gaza. They are exposed to the pandemic there, the polio pandemic, so they should be included as well in this campaign.
Mohamed, stay with us. I just want to bring these live pictures that we have coming in from Israel, Tel Aviv there, which is the Israeli army spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, giving a statement. At the moment, he is speaking in Hebrew. And of course, this comes with the news that one American citizen has been found dead in a tunnel under the city of Rafah in Gaza. He's speaking in Hebrew, and as soon as we have an English translation, we'll bring you that statement here on BBC News. And Mohamed, just reminding us of that statement and the news really in the past few minutes, which is that 6 bodies were found by Israeli forces, and one of them is the body of Hersh Goldberg Polin, an American citizen who'd been taken hostage from Israel on October the 7th.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure that Daniel Hagari, the spokesperson of the Israeli forces, would be speaking about this incident. It's a big incident of finding 6 hostages dead. It will have a big impact on the Israeli society, and it is quite unusual that Mr. Hagari would be speaking in Hebrew. He's always speaking in English, even when he addressing the Israeli society. I think when the White House announced about the American hostage, they want to emphasize that the 5 also Israeli hostages are as important as the American hostage, and they want to send a message to the Israeli community as well that they are important. They are doing their best to try to get the rest of the hostages alive. This news will have, as you rightly said, a big impact on the inside Israel, as the pressure will be more on the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing government to try to strike a deal, try to lessen their demands a little bit upon Hamas. We understand that there is little bit differences between the position of the army in Israel and the political leadership in the government. So the army think that there is no need of having a permanent military presence in Gaza, and that they can operate exactly with the same model that they have in the West Bank, that they redeploy somehow, and they can have access at any time, as we saw in Jenin, as we saw in Tobas, as we saw in Nablus, and we saw in Bethlehem, as we saw in Ramallah, and as we saw in all the operations that they do in the West Bank. They get out of the cities, and when they try to hunt militants, when they have intelligence information that there are confirmed information about the presence of militants, they go for them and they hunt them. They say that they can't do the same model in Gaza, but the political vision in Israel at the moment that they should stay in Gaza, especially in Netzarim and in Philadelphia with the borders with Egypt. I think this news of the hostages will put more pressures on the political leadership in Israel to try and to find some leeway for them to strike a deal with Hamas to try to get the rest of the hostages alive. Otherwise, now the political leadership in Israel will find that there is a threat that they would lose the momentum of their strategic vision in Gaza.
Mohamed, thank you. And please stay with us, of course, as we cover this breaking news coming out of Israel and news that the Israeli army has found the bodies of 6 people in a tunnel under the city of Rafah, and one of them is confirmed to be an American citizen, Hersh Goldberg Polin. And we'll bring you much more on that story as soon as we get more on it here on BBC News. Let's have a look at some other news now. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has accused her Republican rival Donald Trump of disrespecting sacred ground during his recent visit to Arlington National Cemetery. In a post on social media, the Democratic presidential candidate accused Mr. Trump of carrying out a political stunt at the military cemetery on Monday. Trump's visit was filmed and used on social media for election campaign purposes. The US Army has already criticized the Trump campaign team. It said one of Mr. Trump's staff had pushed an official trying to enforce rules barring political campaigning at the site. Well, let's go live now to Minnesota, and we can speak to Richard Painter, the former chief White House ethics lawyer. Thank you for joining us on the program once again. An initial question: what do you make of this controversy surrounding Trump's visit to the Arlington National Cemetery?
Well, this is a breach of a longstanding precedent in the United States that there is to be no politicization of the military. in any way, and certainly no politicization of the memorial services for the dead in wars. And I was the chief White House ethics lawyer under President George W. Bush when this country was at war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there were always those who wanted to politicize the war on terror and those engagements. And we made it very, very clear that that was unacceptable for anyone of any political party, a president, a former president. No one is to be allowed to do that. And Arlington Cemetery, of all places, is a place you'd never even think of having a political commercial filmed. And this was explained to everyone before this event, as this is explained to everyone. It always has been before similar events. We had during the Bush administration, and the Trump campaign people just decided to flout the policies. They knew that this was wrong. And then to make matters worse, apparently there was a physical altercation at the cemetery. And we really cannot tolerate this in the United States. If Donald Trump wants to be president again, he needs to understand that we have laws, we have social norms in this country. He has breached them so many times. And this is yet one more example where Donald Trump and the people around him really think they're above the law and that they can do whatever they want.
And Mr. Painter, as you mentioned there has been criticism from the American army following this visit. But how do you think it's going to play out with voters? You mentioned some people will be offended, but do you think it will really impact Mr. Trump's campaign?
Well, former President Trump has serious legal difficulties, including criminal convictions in New York and 3 other indictments pending, and civil fraud judgment, enormous civil fraud judgment, because he has a track record of flouting the law and showing disregard for the law and proper ways to behave in a civilized society. And I think a lot of voters are realizing that. And what we're going to see in November is whether voters who might agree with the Republican Party on policy will still vote for Kamala Harris, simply because Donald Trump has shown himself to be someone of deficient character. I mean, after all, we've never had someone run for president of the United States in a major party who's under criminal indictment, and he has 4 criminal indictments, one of them ended in conviction. Unheard of.
Unheard of, and we'll see how it unfolds over the next few months in the lead up to the elections there in the US. Thank you for joining us on the program, Richard Painter, former chief White House ethics lawyer. And a reminder of the breaking news this hour, which is that the White House is confirming that one of the 6 bodies found by Israeli forces in a tunnel under the city of Rafah in Gaza is that of an American citizen. They have named him as Hersh Goldberg Polin. So that's the statement there from the White House confirming that the American citizen Hersh Goldberg Polin is one of 6 people, 6 bodies recovered from Gaza. Well, with me now is Mohamed from BBC Arabic. And Mohamed, you've been with us as we've got this breaking news coming in from the US. Just tell us what we know so far.
I read, Catherine, some of what the spokesperson of the Israeli forces was saying in his press conference in Hebrew. So he accused Hamas of killing intentionally these hostages. He said they were killed in a tunnel, in a long tunnel in the city of Rafah. This is the same tunnel that the Israeli forces managed to secure the Israeli Bedouin alive last week. So the same tunnel they found along this tunnel, the hostages in the tunnel. There are some media from the families, the Israeli families, who got already the bodies of their loved ones, who are saying that some of them were killed in July. It's an old killing, and there are some were killed in April.
And Mohamed, we just need to bring viewers this statement that's come in from the Hostages Family Forum headquarters in Israel, saying, with deep sorrow, we once again announce the murder of 6 hostages. These 6 individuals were taken alive, endured the horrors of captivity, and were then coldly murdered. A deal for the return of the hostages has been on the table for over 2 months, they say. Were it not for the delays, sabotage and excuses, those whose deaths we learnt about this morning would likely still be alive. It's time to bring our hostages home, the living for rehabilitation, and the fallen and murdered for burial in their homelands. Again, a reminder of just how important this story is for the many families in Israel who are waiting for their loved ones to be returned from Gaza. So this is breaking news that of 6 bodies that have been recovered from Israel, from Gaza, by the Israeli forces. One of them is confirmed to be an American citizen, Hersh Goldberg, Poland. And of course, this is a story that we continue to cover here on BBC News. You can always go to our website, bbc.co.uk/news, where you will continue to find breaking news as we get it from our colleagues, our correspondents there in Israel, in Gaza, as we get those news coming in. And now on BBC News, it's Click.